Hi there, my name's Kelly Goff. I'm a columnist for the Daily Beast, and I'm here on day 2 of the Women in the World Summit 2014, and we're here in the Toyota Solutions studio, and I am so thrilled to be joined here by Ambassador Melanne Verveer, as well as filmmaker and extraordinary woman, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. Did I get it correct?
Yes, you did.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. So, Ambassador Verveer, you are a staple of the summit. I believe you've been here every single year, correct? Do you have a favorite moment that stands out in your mind?
You know, there can't be a favorite moment because there are so many extraordinary women participating from all over the world. And I am particularly attracted to those who bring these stories that I have experienced every place I've traveled and know about, and the women I've worked with, of being on the front lines of change, doing extraordinary work. Often they are the most ordinary people who never anticipated being in these positions, but saw a vision of not how bad things are and wrung their hands, but a vision of what could be.
Okay,
and these are the what could be people who come here, and they come here out of conflict situations, they come here out of the worst pushback, they come here prevailing over situations that none of us could imagine ourselves into, and they are the agents of change, and they are inspirational.
And that was the perfect segue. I could not have come up with a better one for discussing Sharmeen's work. You have won an Academy Award, an Emmy Award for your amazing film, Saving Face. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that film, and more importantly, what inspired you to make that film?
Saving Face was a story about two women in Pakistan who had been victims and then survivors of acid violence. Acid, being a coercive substance, was thrown on their faces because one of the women wanted a divorce, and because the other woman was generally apparently not acting in accordance to what a wife should have been acting like. Something very trivial. And it was their fight for justice, and how a doctor, a Pakistani doctor who lives in the UK, came back and provided treatment for them, how lawyers rallied to fight their cases, how the Pakistani parliament heard their testimony and then drafted a bill that mandated life imprisonment and a heavy fine for perpetrators of acid violence.
So, Ambassador Verveer, I'm sure you have a laundry list of issues that if you had a magic wand you would try to solve, particularly those related to women and girls. But, you know, her film is about gender violence. What would you say is the #1 issue facing women and girls throughout the world, the most important one to solve?
Well, I think there are several, and this is not #1 or 2, but they all need to be dealt with. And I want to pick up on something Sharmeen just said, which is this situation of women. And maybe this is one of the dominant considerations. And that is, we often see women as victims. Women who've been victimized by acid burning. Women who have been victims of rape as a tool of war. Women who are victims of the horrors that are perpetrated against them in conflict. And they are victims, truly, but they are much more than victims. And we see them constantly through the lens of victimhood. When they are the agents of change. And this really struck me one night in Afghanistan. And I was sitting with a group of women in Kabul, and the first one said to me, "Stop looking at us as victims and look at us as the leaders that we are." And I think she was profoundly correct, because if we only look at a woman as helpless, as victimized, then we don't see them for all that they can do, for the leaders that they can be, whether in Afghanistan or anywhere else in the world. And in fact, they are powerful in the work that they can do and must do. And even the women in DRC Congo, who have been brutally impacted by what is happening there, they said to me, "We want to go from pain, the horrible pain, the unspeakable pain, to power." What kind of power? Power over their lives, power to produce again, power to have a little market, power to control their situation, to have normalcy. And really, this is a very fundamental point, that we have to see women in all of their ways, across all of their geographies, across the sectors, for the potential that they represent to our world. And I think one of the worst problems is the one that Sharmeen depicted in the film we just talked about, is violence against women, which is a scourge, a global scourge. But So is the need for women to be economically empowered, and in many ways that is the portal through which they become much more independent. They avoid constant violence that is perpetrated against them in many ways. They run for office, they become effectors of their community. And the toughest challenge of all, where we're not making much progress, is the role of women in political power, political empowerment, whatever level, being taken seriously in wielding power in villages, in national governments, in parliaments, at the peace table. So we still have a journey, but we have made significant progress. It is uneven, so we have a lot of work still to do.
On that note, you were the first ambassador for women, ambassador at large for global women's issues ever. Why was it important for that role to be created, and why do you think President Obama saw the need for this specific role?
Because it is impossible for any country to get ahead if it leaves half of its people behind. And if you look at the challenges that our world confronts, that the State Department, our foreign ministry deals with every day, whether it's the environment, it's security, it's economic growth and jobs creation, shared prosperity, whether it's all of the issues that impact governance, the quality of leaders, you cannot reach the kind of conclusions that we want to see for our world if we write off half of our population. The talent, the perspectives, the participation that is absolutely essential. I always say a bird can't fly with one wing. We need both wings. And our world is deficient to the extent we are not tapping the potential of our women.
Sharmeen, so there are people who try to change things for the better for women by running for elected office, by becoming ambassadors. Why did you choose media as your medium for social change?
You know, I don't know, ever since I was 14 years old, I always wanted to tell the story of those people who are unable to tell their own stories. And I think for a few reasons. One, because I think it empowers other people to follow in their footsteps. And it's important for women to have other women role models, to know that they have been able to shatter stereotypes, that they have been able to kick open doors and lead the way. And many of the women that I'm profiling in my work are doing enormous grassroots change, but they're unable to tell their own stories. And so by shining a light on their lives, I am able to amplify their voice. And in amplifying their voice, not only do I hope to help them in the mission that they're in, but also inspire the next generation of young women to follow in their footsteps.
Which brings me to my last question. There's a question that you've been asked a million times, which I'm not going to ask you because you wouldn't answer it anyway, which is about your dear friend, Secretary Clinton, whether or not she's going to run for president. So I'm not going to ask you that.
You saw how she tried to avoid it last night.
I've seen her try to avoid it a lot of times, and very deftly and effectively, by the way. But what I will ask you is, what impact do you think it has on women, but particularly girls, to see women in leadership positions at that level, whether you're talking about Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister or Benazir Bhutto, or whether or not there's a President Clinton someday, and I mean the female Clinton, of course. What impact do you think that has on women and girls?
Well, I've seen it. It's tremendously inspiring, it's validating, it's hugely aspirational. If a woman or girl never sees a woman chief scientist or president or village council member, she never thinks for herself that this is something I can aspire to. But when that happens, it is enormously validating. And I hear this wherever I go, what that modeling represents, what it has meant to women that Secretary Clinton has taken on these issues, that she's been active in this domain at a very high level, validating these issues. That raises everybody up. It's like Sharmeen said, you know, in her films when she spotlights even difficult situations, it puts an emphasis on why this is wrong in many instances, but why these women's work has to continue and why others have to join this cause. It's validating. And so to have role models is extremely important, whether in the economic sector, the political sector, in civil society. It provides that young woman, that girl, the sense of reality that I can do that too. I can get there one day.
I remember reading somewhere that when Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, did I pronounce it right?
Yeah.
Who was the prime minister in Iceland for years and years, that there were little boys who actually thought that that was a female role, being prime minister. And I thought, wouldn't that be extraordinary to have that here in America, right? So I'd like to thank Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, the incredible filmmaker, and Ambassador Verveer for joining us today
Thank you,
here
Kelly.
in the Toyota Solutions studio here at the Women in the World Summit 2014.